Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we synthesize complex research, philosophy, and history to give you the essential, actionable insights you need. Today, we're diving deep into a tension that, well, it really defines the lives of billions. A tension so sharp it's cutting through the fabric of modern society. We're talking about the paradox of hope.
It really is the great contradiction of our time. I mean, objectively, if you just look at the raw statistics, humanity has never been safer or richer or healthier.
Right.
By almost every measurable standard, progress has delivered a world that is just, objectively better than any time before it.
And that's a truth that can be so hard to stomach when we're, scrolling through the news every day. We've analyzed sources that detail this, and the progress is just undeniable. Think about the facts. Extreme poverty is plummeting worldwide.
Plummeting. And global violence, despite what the headlines might scream at you, is at a historical low.
We're living longer, literacy rates are higher, and we've beaten diseases that wiped out, half of previous generations?
Exactly. When you look at the work of authors like Steven Pinker, who really document this global trend, the overwhelming conclusion is that materially, we are winning. The basic struggle for survival, food, shelter, security, that's largely over for most of us in the developed world.
Okay, but if that's true, why does it feel like we're losing the war inside our own heads? Why, despite all this progress, all this prosperity, is there this irrational, pervasive sense of hopelessness and anxiety gripping the rich world?
That is the paradox. That's the core question we need to unpack today, because the data on our mental and emotional well-being tells a completely different story, a much darker one.
You're talking about the upswing in depression.
A massive one. We're seeing depression and anxiety symptoms on an 80-year upswing in young people, and it's showing up earlier and earlier. And there's a sustained 20-year upswing in adults.
And the societal cost of that is just staggering. It's not just that we're anxious as individuals, we're fundamentally disconnecting from each other. Stress levels have soared, and the data on loneliness, it's startling.
It is. We're talking about nearly half of all Americans reporting that they feel isolated, left out, or just completely alone.
That feeling of isolation is like a cancer on the collective psyche, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
One study we looked at paints this just devastating picture of fragmentation. Back in the 80s, researchers asked people a simple question. How many individuals did you discuss important personal matters with in the last 6 months?
Okay.
The most common answer then was 3. 3 people. By the mid-2000s, they asked again. The most common answer had shrunk down to 0.
0. Wow. That's not just fragmentation, that's a complete breakdown of the communal safety net.
And when you couple that profound isolation with, plummeting social trust, you get a society where people are just looking for any available escape.
Which explains why drug overdoses are at an all-time high. It speaks volumes, doesn't it? Prosperity bought us comfort, but it completely failed to purchase peace of mind.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really analyze the psychological and philosophical mechanics behind this feeling of malaise, this spiritual crisis. We need to understand how we generate hope, why that system is failing so catastrophically in the modern world, and what ancient and modern philosophy suggests is the real pathway to freedom and maturity.
Beyond just, chasing happiness.
Beyond the conditional pursuit of happiness, exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should start with the core existential truth that underpins everything we do, which the authors call the uncomfortable truth.
This is the non-negotiable reality we all have to face. And it is this. One day, you and everyone you love will die. And beyond a small group of people for an extremely brief period of time, little of what you say or do will ever matter.
Oof.
Yeah. We're conscious beings living on this tiny, fragile speck of dust in an uncaring infinite cosmos.
And the sources really emphasize that this isn't some, poetic metaphor. The universe fundamentally does not care about our human concerns.
Not at all. It's completely indifferent to our elections, our spreadsheets, or whether the ice caps melt. Humans care. We are the ones who invented caring.
But our psychology just can't tolerate that feeling of being totally inconsequential. Our whole internal operating system, it demands purpose. It demands meaning to function.
Right. Hopelessness isn't just a bad mood. It's the philosophical opposite of happiness. It's that endless gray horizon of resignation and indifference. If nothing matters, then why bother? Why endure the struggle?
So we are psychologically forced to invent purpose. We have to invent meaning, and that whole process of invention, that belief in a better outcome, that's what hope is.
Hope is the necessary lie we tell ourselves to keep getting out of bed in the morning.
So how do we maintain this lie? The sources identify three essential pillars, right?
Three interlocking pillars that we have to generate and maintain. And if any one of them falters, the whole psychological structure just starts to crumble and we risk spiraling into that void.
Okay, so what are the three pillars?
First, we need a sense of control over our fate. If we feel like we're just being tossed around by external forces, agency evaporates.
Okay, control. What's number two?
Second, we need a belief in the value of something, some kind of coherent purpose that, transcends the self.
And third?
Critically, we need a community to share it with. If we lack one or all of these for too long, the uncomfortable truth just rushes right back in.
All right, let's start by digging into that first pillar, control. For literally millennia, philosophers, religious thinkers, early psychologists, they all operated under this deeply ingrained belief about how our minds work. The sources call it the classic assumption.
The classic assumption, right. It basically posits that our passions, our emotions, the things that make us act irrationally or indulge, they're flaws.
They're bugs in the system.
Exactly. They're errors that need to be subjugated, fixed, by our superior faculty of reason, by what we can call the thinking brain.
It's the old Stoic ideal taken to an extreme. And if you fail to do that, if you can't control your emotions with logic, it's not just an error, it's a moral failing, a sign of weak character.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this moral judgment everywhere in modern life.
Everywhere.
Think about the stigma around almost any lack of discipline, whether it's, financial mismanagement, addiction, even poor dietary choices. The public assumption is always that this person just didn't try hard enough. They didn't apply enough mental effort.
We celebrate people who seem to be ruthlessly disciplined, right? We treat their efficiency as if it's some sign of moral superiority.
And this assumption, it just traps us. It forces us into this desperate cycle of hoping that tomorrow we'll wake up as a totally new, more disciplined person. And when we inevitably fail, we just descend into self-loathing, which only makes us feel more powerless, more hopeless.
The thing is, modern neurology and psychology have, for the most part, completely debunked this classic assumption.
They have. And the case of Elliot, which is detailed in the sources, is probably the most powerful piece of evidence against this idea of pure rational control.
Tell us about Elliot. His story is so tragic, but so incredibly illustrative.
So Elliot was a patient who had a large tumor removed from his frontal lobe. And because of the surgery, he lost the ability to generate or feel emotion. But, and this is the crucial part, the surgery left his reasoning faculties completely intact.
So his memory, his IQ, his ability to calculate consequences.
All perfect. He could articulate the rational choice in any given situation. He knew what he should do.
But he couldn't feel why it was important. So what happened to this supposedly hyper-rational human?
He didn't become some kind of superhuman machine. He became completely dysfunctional. He turned into what his doctors called an indifference machine. Without any emotional weight attached to outcomes, his thinking brain just couldn't prioritize.
So we do what?
He would spend 8 hours agonizing over whether to file papers alphabetically or by date. He lost his job because he'd skip important meetings to chase some trivial distraction, like finding a cheaper brand of stapler.
So he could understand the consequences of, say, losing $1 million, but he just felt nothing about it.
Exactly that. Losing a fortune felt exactly the same as pumping gas. And this proved that emotions aren't flaws to be suppressed. They're instrumental. They are the value-assigning system that allows the thinking brain to even function.
So without feelings, we lose the ability to decide what's important, and then we can't act effectively.
Which means self-control isn't the thinking brain suppressing the feeling brain. It's an illusion. It's a wonderful illusion that happens when the two are aligned and pulling in the same direction.
That completely reframes the internal conflict we all feel. And the sources use a brilliant analogy to help visualize this, the consciousness car.
Yeah, the consciousness car. So imagine your consciousness is a car, and it has 2 travelers inside. The thinking brain is the passenger. It's the navigator. It's your conscious thought, your reasoning, your calculation. It can suggest routes, list pros and cons.
But it's not driving.
It is not driving. The feeling brain, your emotions, your impulses, your intuition, it is the driver. It holds the steering wheel and it's got its foot on the gas.
The moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt, he described this as the elephant and the rider, right? The feeling brain is the massive elephant, and the thinking brain is just the rider on top.
That's the one. And the rider can gently tug the reins, but if that elephant decides it wants to run toward the watering hole, well, the rider's just going along for the ride. The elephant is this vast, ancient biological system that generates all the energy for our actions.
The problem, then, is when the thinking brain just gives up its job as navigator entirely. That's what the sources call the clown car scenario.
The clown car, yes. This is what happens when the thinking brain capitulates. It dedicates all of its immense rational power, not to finding the right direction, but to justifying whatever the feeling brain has already decided it wants to do.
I see this in myself all the time. Can you give an example of the clown car in action?
Oh, sure. Take impulsive spending. Your feeling brain wants that immediate dopamine rush from a new purchase. The thinking brain, the navigator, should be calculating the long-term debt consequences.
But it doesn't.
Instead, it justifies the action. It says, you know what, I deserve this because I worked hard today, or it's actually an investment. Or my favorite, I'll just make the money back next week.
So the thinking brain isn't guiding, it's just providing cover fire for the driver's impulse.
Exactly. The clown car is essentially the intellectual machinery behind addiction and self-gratification, when the thinking brain is just a cheerleader for the feeling brain's desire for pleasure. That nihilistic pursuit drives addiction, narcissism, and makes people incredibly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what?
Vulnerable because they become so easily manipulated by any group or product or politician that promises to make them feel good consistently. If your thinking brain is just justifying impulse, you have no stable internal compass.
But if the thinking brain can't actually control the driver, how do we get the car going in the right direction?
The key is influence. It's communication. You cannot order the feeling brain, but you can persuade it. You have to appeal to the driver in the only language it understands, which is feelings.
It's like a negotiation.
It's a negotiation. The sources use the analogy of bargaining with a Moroccan rug seller.
Yeah.
You have to make the feeling brain believe it's getting a really good, immediate emotional deal for choosing the difficult long-term path.
So instead of thinking, I have to exercise because it's good for me, which is a rational thought, I need to focus on the immediate, visceral feeling of self-respect and energy I get after the workout.
You got it. You're appealing to the feeling brain's desire for positive emotional input. Or if you're building a new habit, the thinking brain writes these little stories, these narratives, emphasizing the respect and significance that the new behavior brings. Those are powerful emotional drivers.
And this is the hard, daily work of what's called emotional regulation.
It's not repression, it's alignment.
So we're essentially setting up guardrails and one-way signs on the road of life to stop the feeling brain from just driving off a cliff. It's about building habits and environments that make the beneficial choice the easiest, most emotionally rewarding one.
And when you achieve that consistent internal alignment, when the navigator and the driver finally agree on the destination, that is when the useful illusion of self-control arises. But if they're misaligned, you feel powerless, and the world starts to feel overwhelmingly hopeless.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for our second pillar of hope, which is establishing values. If self-control is about executing the path, then values are what determine the destination. We're moving now from the internal mechanics to how we form our identity, using what the material calls Newton's 3 laws of emotion.
This is a really powerful framework for explaining how we assign value, and it all starts with the one unavoidable constant of life, which is pain.
Right.
The first law, they call it the law of moral gaps, states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite emotional reaction.
That sounds like basic physics, but just, applied to our psyche.
It is. Any kind of pain, physical or emotional, stubbing your toe, getting betrayed, losing your job, it immediately creates what's called a moral gap.
A moral gap. What is that?
It's the gap between what happened and what you feel should have happened. And that gap generates this instant emotional demand for some kind of equalization, for justice.
So even just yelling at the coffee table when you stub your toe.
That's your feeling brain demanding justice from the universe. The intensity of our emotions, our anger, our sadness, is directly proportional to the size of that perceived moral gap. We are just psychologically wired to demand justice, even if the universe isn't offering any.
But what happens when that equalization never comes, when the pain just keeps going and that moral gap stays open?
Well, the mind has to find a way to resolve it internally. And this leads us to the second law, the law of self-worth. And it is this. Our self-worth equals the sum of our emotions over time.
Okay, wait, so if I'm continually subjected to some injustice and I can't resolve it, my feeling brain eventually just accepts that as the new normal. So what conclusion does it draw from that normalization of pain?
The feeling brain concludes, I must deserve this. If the pain persists without any external justification, the mind creates an internal one. This leads to low self-worth.
And the opposite is also true.
The opposite is also true. If you're consistently showered with undeserved positive reinforcement, like constant praise or participation trophies, you develop an equally skewed, high self-worth.
And the sources make a crucial point here. They say these are just two sides of the same counterfeit coin, which they define as narcissism.
Precisely. Narcissism is just the state of imagining oneself as something special, something separate from the rest of the world. The low self-worth narcissist imagines they're uniquely broken or suffering. That's the victim narrative.
And the high self-worth narcissist imagines they're uniquely superior or deserving, the entitled narrative.
And the tragic irony is that both of them end up oscillating wildly between the two. The person who feels constantly inferior suddenly demands recognition, flips to superiority, only to get crushed when reality doesn't cooperate, and then they revert right back to inferiority.
They reject the messy, uncomfortable reality because it would mean they have to give up their sense of being special, of being uniquely separated from the mundane struggles everyone else faces.
Exactly. And this perpetual suffering is rooted in the stories we tell ourselves, which brings us to the third law, the law of identity change. And it says, your identity will stay your identity until a new experience acts against it.
So our identity isn't just a list of facts about us. It's these sticky narratives our thinking brain constructs to explain what our feeling brain is feeling.
And these narratives always revolve around value and deservedness. I am successful because I'm smart and worked hard, or, on the flip side, bad things happen to me and I didn't deserve it. These stories determine what we feel we deserve in life. They define our value hierarchy.
So if I want to change a core identity narrative, let's say I want to stop believing I'm a victim, I can't just talk myself out of it. I mean, a new, contrary emotional experience.
You do. The only way to genuinely change those sticky narratives, and therefore your identity and your values, is through experiences that are contrary to your current values. And that means pain, means discomfort. Growth is synonymous with voluntarily confronting discomfort.
The thinking brain can start this process right, even if it can't force the feeling brain. It does this through something called fruitful visualization. But this is another area where a lot of modern advice gets it wrong.
So wrong. Most modern visualization is just, well, it's self-gratification. If you value materialism, you fantasize about the God you already want. That just reinforces your current value. It's masturbating to your current value system.
That's a crucial distinction. Real visualization has to challenge the existing value.
Yes. Real, fruitful change involves fantasizing about what not wanting the yacht would feel like. You project yourself into a future where you get emotional satisfaction from discipline or contribution rather than from buying things.
And that fantasy should feel a little uncomfortable.
It should. That internal discomfort is the signal that you are actually beginning the process of shifting your identity narrative.
Okay, so this inherent emotional drive to align our values then scales up massively when we get into groups, which leads to this idea of emotional gravity.
Values have a kind of emotional gravity. We're pulled toward people who share our highest values, and we instinctively repel those with contrary values. And the stronger, more deeply held values create tighter orbits.
And when enough people share these values, they congeal and organize themselves into a single, coherent body. That's a group identity, a tribe, a political movement, a nation.
Now, here's the devastating irony of human conflict. The material makes it clear that most people, across all cultures, want basically the same things. Safety, dignity, basic resources. But it's those slight tertiary differences in how we rank our values. Individualism versus community, tradition versus progress. Those generate intense, disproportionate emotion.
So we focus all our emotional energy on the 5% where we disagree, making those small differences feel existentially important instead of focusing on the 95% where we're identical.
This is the fuel of modern polarization. Social media is an expert at leveraging this emotional gravity. It creates these tight, closed orbits where contradictory values are instantly repelled, allowing a slight difference of opinion, say, on tax policy, to be amplified by the feeling brain into this moral chasm separating us from them.
And historically, when these group identities solidify and their contradictory values collide, especially when people are willing to die for their highest values, their family, their nation, their God, that's when war happens. It's the tragic, inevitable endpoint of emotional gravity. This intense, value-driven conflict brings us to the next major part of this deep dive, which is the necessary dark side of this whole topic. Why hope itself is, and the sources use this word, fucked. Why it's so philosophically dangerous because of its idealistic nature.
Wait, to sustain any civilization, or even just an individual life, every human has to believe, on faith, that something is important. This is the God value. It's the top of your value hierarchy that gives meaning to everything else below it.
And because values come from the feeling brain, this God value can't be proven with objective evidence, right? If it could be, it wouldn't be a value, it would just be a fact.
Exactly. Evidence belongs to the thinking brain, and the sources argue that evidence always serves the God value, not the other way around. If my God value is economic efficiency, I'll find all the evidence that supports deregulation.
And if my God value is environmental preservation, I'll find all the evidence to support strict government oversight.
Right. The evidence just acts as a justification for the feeling. And this fundamental need for a God value gives rise to religions, which are defined here really broadly as any structured system that generates and maintains hope.
And the sources break them down into three types.
The first is spiritual religions. These draw hope from supernatural beliefs, an afterlife, divine justice, karma. They are incredibly robust to worldly failure. If your life falls apart, your spiritual hope stays intact because the supernatural realm doesn't care about market crashes. That psychological stability is their greatest strength.
But the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, they sort of eroded their dominance, which led to the rise of the second type, ideological religion.
Your isms, communism, capitalism, nationalism, progressivism.
All right.
These ideologies generate hope from the natural world. They're based on the belief that certain political or economic actions in this life will produce a better future if everyone just adopts them. They're verifiable to a degree, but they still require a leap of faith.
And they're inherently less robust than spiritual religion.
Much less, because they live and die by their results. When a nationalist project fails or a communist state collapses, the ideological hope just crumbles and it leaves a huge psychological vacuum.
Which is often filled by the third category, interpersonal religions.
These are basically arbitrary value systems designed simply to give hope and identity to followers. Think of intense sports fandom or deep-seated party politics.
They work by, deifying certain leaders and demonizing others, creating this shared sense of virtue and opposition. Politics in this context is just an interpersonal religion where we hope our leaders will deliver some kind of secular salvation.
And Nietzsche was deeply worried about this shift. He saw that while ideologies like capitalism produce wealth, they just don't have the staying power of the spiritual kind. When these human-made systems inevitably fail, new, often more extreme ideologies just rush in to promise a new, brighter future.
Okay, let's turn to the myth of Pandora's box to really get at the ambiguity of hope. We all know the common story. Pandora opens the box, releases all the world's evils, sickness, death, hatred, but hope stays inside as the one antidote.
The cure was preserved. That's the nice version.
But there's a less popular, much more unsettling interpretation.
Which is that hope is simply another form of evil, left inside the box with all the others. It's a pernicious double-edged sword.
Because it's transactional. It requires you to reject the present for the sake of some idealized future.
To illustrate this, let's go back to the story of Witold Pilecki. You have to appreciate this story to really understand the power and the danger of hope. He was a Polish officer who, in 1940, volunteered to be arrested by the Nazis so he could sneak into Auschwitz.
It defies belief. He chose the worst place on earth purely out of hope.
And his mission was incredible. For over 2 years, he built an intelligence network, organized resistance, smuggled information out. He was a source of hope in a place designed to crush the human spirit. His actions were heroic. It proves that hope can conjure possibility where there is none.
And yet, after he successfully escaped, that very same commitment to hope led directly to his destruction.
He kept fighting. He continued his resistance against the new Soviet-controlled Polish government because he believed so passionately in the hope of a truly free Poland. He had chances to flee, but he refused. He saw it as betrayal of his deepest value, and he was eventually captured by the Soviets.
And the irony is just devastating. The sources say the Soviet torture he went through was so bad that he told his wife in their final meeting, and I'm quoting here, Auschwitz was just a trifle by comparison. He was executed in 1948.
His hope, that unwavering commitment to a better future, was the engine of his suffering and his demise. And the lesson is stark. Hope requires us to be anti-something, anti-Nazi, anti-Soviet, and that rejection of the present inherently generates division and, well, potentially profound suffering.
And we have to acknowledge that hope inspired not just heroes, but also monsters. Hitler hoped for a superior race. The Soviets hoped for a global communist utopia. Hope is just the engine. The value system is the fuel.
So if hope is so dangerous, where do we turn? The philosophical path forward has to be beyond hope. This is the evolution demanded by thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who, despite decades of crippling illness, called for an evolution to beyond good and evil.
And that evolution happens through something called amor fati, the love of one's fate.
Amor fati means wanting nothing to be different. Not just bearing what's necessary, but actually loving it unconditionally. It's the full, non-transactional acceptance of every single moment of life. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the terrible. It completely dismantles the conditional nature of hope.
This philosophical acceptance of reality, it aligns so powerfully with the moral philosophy of Immanuel Kant. He was trying to find a morality that didn't depend on some imagined future utopia.
Kant argued that the only truly unique and valuable thing in the entire universe is consciousness, our ability to reason and be self-aware. Therefore, our most fundamental moral duty is the preservation and growth of consciousness in ourselves and in others.
Which leads directly to his ultimate moral law, the formula of humanity. Act that you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means.
Let's break down that distinction, because it's the key to escaping the trap of hope. A means is conditional. It's a tool you use to get something else. An end is desired for its own sake.
Can you give us a few clear examples?
Sure. Think about your job. For many people, a job is just a means to earn money. The money is a means to buy food. The food is a means to satisfy hunger. The ultimate end is sustaining life. If the job stops producing money, you drop it. It was conditional.
So what about when we treat people as a means?
If you only compliment your boss because you want a raise, you're treating them as a means to your own financial betterment. Kant says this is fundamentally unethical because you're not respecting their inherent worth as a conscious being, as an end in themselves.
And the formula demands we apply this to ourselves too. We often treat our own bodies, our own consciousness, as a means to some future state of comfort or pleasure.
And that is the core shift from what you could call adolescent bargaining to adult virtue. Adolescence is transactional. I'll tolerate this pain, these rules, because they lead to a pleasurable end. I'll study only if it guarantees a good grade.
But adult virtue, Kant's virtue, is unconditional. It means doing what is right simply because it is right, regardless of whether it brings pleasure or pain down the line.
So self-improvement isn't about cultivating happiness, which is conditional. It's about cultivating self-respect. Treating ourselves as an end means being honest with ourselves, having dignity in the present moment. Lying to ourselves or settling for shallow diversions is just as unethical as lying to others. The path beyond hope is achieved by focusing on the unconditional choices you make right now.
Okay, so if the path to maturity requires this unconditional virtue, why is the developed world so plagued by anxiety and immaturity? Why are we collectively so childish and fragile? Our sources point squarely at the economic structures that define the modern malaise, which is driven by what they call the feelings economy.
Fundamentally, the modern world runs on feelings, not facts.
Yeah.
We're all driven by that feeling brain. So if people buy and act based on emotion, then the ability to influence those emotions grants you massive money and power.
The sources trace this all the way back to the 1920s, to Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew. He was the one who realized that mass marketing isn't about rational arguments. It's about targeting the feeling brain, tapping directly into people's insecurities and pain points.
His most infamous example was the campaign to get women to smoke in public. It wasn't about the nicotine at all. It was about connecting cigarettes to the emotional story of identity and independence. He framed them as torches of freedom.
Making women feel inadequate if they didn't participate.
Exactly. And modern marketing follows that playbook perfectly. It constantly makes you feel inadequate or fearful or desirous in order to sell you the solution.
And this profit motive has caused a huge economic shift away from genuine progress. Economic growth originally came from innovation, things that genuinely reduced human pain advances in medicine, sanitation, automation.
But once a society hits first world status, where basic needs are met and major pain points are mostly gone, economic growth pivots. It pivots toward diversion.
What's diversion?
Diversion is products and services designed specifically to numb, mitigate, or help us avoid the mild, inescapable pain of daily life. So excessive entertainment, social media, convenience apps, escapist consumption.
This shift explains the paradox of progress in economic terms. When a developing nation gets innovation, well-being soars. But once you hit that baseline of comfort, further growth often comes from diversion, and well-being flattens out, or, critically, mental illness starts to proliferate.
We become psychologically weak. We get fragile, obsessed with maintaining our comfort.
And we need to look at the core psychological mechanism that makes us so fragile. It's called the blue dot effect, or prevalence-induced concept change.
Let's get into the experiment. In the original study, researchers showed people a sequence of dots and asked them to identify the blue ones.
Simple enough.
But as they systematically reduced the number of truly blue dots, participants started identifying purple dots as blue, and eventually even red dots as blue. Their perceptual definition of blue just expanded to maintain the expected rate.
So our minds are hardwired to maintain a preset expectation of a threat or a problem. It's an evolutionary mechanism to keep us vigilant.
It is. And when you apply that to society, the conclusion is startling. As major existential pains, war, famine, plague are removed, the mind amplifies minor problems and grievances to fit that expected degree of stress. Our whole definition of threat or injustice just broadens.
Which gives us the perfect explanation for why trivial grievances generate such hysterical outrage today. As outright hostility is removed from the workplace, we become hypersensitized to perceived microaggressions.
We fail to develop maturity because we're sheltered from genuine adversity. The mind sees mountains where there are molehills. We become increasingly fragile, demanding that the world constantly conform to our hypersensitive expectations. The whole society ends up screaming over spilled milk as if it's a catastrophic flood.
And this constant pursuit of comfort, this avoidance of pain, leads us directly to the difference between fake freedom and real freedom.
Fake freedom is the illusion of choice through overabundance. It's the hundreds of streaming channels, the endless dating apps, the 50 brands of cereal at the store.
But isn't more choice more freedom?
Only superficially. The sources argue that fake freedom is addictive. It requires huge energy for diminishing emotional returns, and ultimately it just makes us more anxious and fragile. The constant fear of missing out or the anxiety over whether we chose the best thing, it just imprisons us in a cycle of hope.
It sounds like the fake freedom offered by the feelings economy is just another way of feeding our narcissism. The idea that we're uniquely deserving of endless, perfect options.
It is. And the only true ethical form of freedom is real freedom. And that's achieved through self-limitation and commitment. It's the conscious, difficult choice of what pain, what sacrifice, what boundaries to bring into your life.
That seems so counterintuitive, but it's powerful. How does self-limitation grant freedom?
By opting into voluntary constraints, you gain mastery over your own impulses. The pain of regular exercise, for example, that's a self-imposed limitation. You choose to suffer in the gym. But that choice grants you a physical freedom a sedentary person can never know.
A strong work ethic, choosing the pain of effort, grants career freedom.
And the commitment to a spouse, which is the self-limitation of choosing one person, grants a profound depth of emotional freedom and security that you just cannot replicate by dating 1,000 different people.
So real freedom demands nothing of the world. It's a victory over your own desires.
And any life hack that tries to reap the rewards of commitment without making an actual commitment is just an empty calorie for the soul. It's another sad form of fake freedom.
And if we collectively choose this fake freedom over real freedom, we risk the collapse of our whole system of governance, exactly as Plato predicted thousands of years ago.
Plato believed democracy was inherently unstable. He thought it would inevitably descend into moral decay and then tyranny. Why? Because a democracy reflects the will of its people, and the will of the people, left unchecked, instinctively flees from pain and races toward comfort and happiness.
So as prosperity grows, the blue dot effect kicks in, and our desires become increasingly infinite and trivial.
Exactly. And eventually, our institutions, the government, the markets, they can't possibly keep up with these boundless, hypersensitive desires. And when that happens, people don't blame their own fragile expectations. They blame the system itself. Their tolerance for complexity and compromise just vanishes.
And democracy is messy. It requires discomfort and compromise, all the things the pursuit of happiness teaches us to run from.
When citizens prioritize pleasure and comfort, they become ill-suited for the very institution that's supposed to serve them. They demand instant gratification, and they start looking for a strong, tyrannical leader to come in and fix everything immediately. The pursuit of conditional happiness isn't just undermining our mental health, it's a critical risk factor for the health of democracy itself.
We've traveled from the existential void to the consciousness car, we've mapped the gravity of our values, and we've seen how this pursuit of comfort creates a modern malaise of anxiety and narcissism. So, what does this post-hope challenge require of you, the listener? It means embracing the one universal constant we've all been trying to outrun: pain.
Let's go back to that observation psychologists call the trick of sevens. Most people, regardless of their objective circumstances, rich, poor, healthy, ill, They tend to rate their overall happiness at about a 7 out of 10.
So life is just this constant bobbing up and down around that level.
It is. And the tragedy is that this constant, mild but not fully satisfied state tricks us into always seeking a higher number, always hoping for better.
But the universal constant isn't happiness, it's pain. Pain is inevitable. It is the first arrow of life. But suffering, which is the interpretation, the reaction we attach to that pain, that's a choice.
The quality of our life is determined by the quality of our character, and our character is determined by our relationship to pain. The effort to eliminate pain only increases our sensitivity to suffering. If we want to grow, we need meaningful struggles. The answer isn't to avoid pain, but to actively choose it and engage with it.
Which brings us to Nassim Taleb's powerful concept of anti-fragility. Let's define the 3 types of systems we encounter.
First, you have the fragile system. This breaks under stress. A crystal vase or a banking system that collapses under an unexpected shock. Second, you have the robust system. This resists stress and stays the same. Think of a solid metal oil drum. It endures the storm without changing.
But the anti-fragile system is the rare one. It's the system that actually gains from stressors, from volatility, from external pressures.
Startup culture, for example. It seeks out small failures early on to get information and strengthen its core. A healthy relationship, when it faces tragedy, the bond actually strengthens. And virtues like bravery or honesty, you aren't born with them. They gain from the stress of having to be brave or honest under pressure.
So anti-fragility is synonymous with psychological growth and maturity. It requires us to dive into the stream of life's pain and navigate it, which strengthens us on the other side.
The Buddhist practice of meditation is basically the ultimate daily practice of anti-fragility. It's not about finding quiet. It's about training the mind to observe the ebb and flow of pain and emotion. That's the first arrow, without being carried away by the mental reaction, which is the second arrow of suffering.
If we can train ourselves to only be struck by that first arrow, the actual immediate pain of existence, we can essentially make ourselves invincible to mental suffering. The sources point to the extreme example of Thich Quang Duc, the monk who self-immolated in Saigon in 1963.
His incredible composure, his absolute stillness as he burned, it's the ultimate demonstration of this mastery. Mind over matter. Unconditional virtue over instinct. And that single act of pure resolve, it triggered millions, it helped change the course of the war, and it showed the dignity that can be achieved when a person masters their relationship to pain.
So psychological growth is the escape from nihilism. It's building a value hierarchy sophisticated enough to stomach whatever life throws our way. And the transactional pursuit of happiness just avoids this necessary growth. It treats ourselves as a means to comfort.
But when we choose our pain, when we voluntarily opt into self-limitation and unconditional virtue, treating our own consciousness as an end, that is when we make life meaningful. We stop waiting for external conditions to satisfy us.
So the final challenge is clear. The path forward requires letting go of the transactional mindset of hoping for a better life. Kant showed us that the only logical way to improve the world is through the maturation and dignity of each individual right now in the present.
The simple decision in each moment is to treat ourselves and others as ends, and never merely as means. Don't hope for a better life, simply be a better life. That is the essence of true freedom.
So to summarize this deep dive, we established that material progress has, paradoxically, driven massive anxiety, largely because of the blue dot effect, where our minds amplify minor grievances. We learned that self-control is an illusion, achieved only when our thinking brain and feeling brain are aligned.
We mapped the emotional gravity of our values, understanding that our high-stakes commitment to conditional hope and group identity leads to perpetual conflict. And we saw that hope itself is a double-edged sword, capable of inspiring both the heroic and the genocidal.
The path beyond this destructive idealism lies in Nietzsche's unconditional acceptance of reality through Amor Fati and Kant's formula of humanity treating self and others as an end. We have to reject the fake freedom of endless diversion and opt instead for the real freedom found only in conscious self-limitation.
Real change is about cultivating self-respect through unconditional virtue in the present, recognizing that the quality of life is determined by our relationship to pain and striving for anti-fragility.
Now, let's leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on this idea of self-respect in the current state of the feelings economy. We discussed how power flows from the ability to process and manipulate information.
So, consider the impending AI revolution. We are rapidly approaching a point where advanced general intelligence will outstrip human mental capacities so completely that it will reorganize society in ways your thinking brain will struggle to comprehend and your erratic feeling brain will be entirely incapable of managing.
And if advanced AI inevitably becomes the best information processor on the planet, then by the very rules of the modern economy, power and authority will flow to it. I mean, we already willingly submit our agency to algorithms every day. They determine our routes, our friends, our purchases.
So the crucial question for the human race is this. If we are already willingly submitting our agency to algorithms for comfort and convenience, and if our future AI systems reorganize society for efficiency, not for human emotion, what dignity can we possibly preserve? Is the final religion of humanity one of flesh and blood, or is it one of code and optimization?
And what ultimate worth do we even retain unless we first achieve true virtue and self-respect, treating our own consciousness as an unconditional end before the external world is inevitably optimized for us? Something to think about as you navigate the noise of the feelings economy and choose your battles.
Until next time, choose your pain wisely.